Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Ronna, and before I introduce tonight's guest, I have a couple of announcements to start with. They might be on the community calendar, but I want to make sure you really hear these. Tomorrow is the famous food stroll, New London's fall and spring activity. There are about 30 restaurants at least participating, music, store deals. It is sponsored by New London Main Street, and you can go to their website if you're interested in more information. It's always a lot of fun, and you get to see what New London has to offer. The second thing I wanted to announce is this coming Saturday at Union Station, there will be an art opening, and not just any art opening. On September 13th, when we had our Down by the Riverside Festival, there were 32 or 33 artists that were painting all around Riverside Park, on the beach, near the tracks, near the crafters, near the music. And most of those artists are submitting one or two paintings to be displayed at Union Station. And Saturday is the opening reception from 7 to 9. There's no cost, open to the public. We'll have refreshments, we'll have music thanks to Golden Ratio. And again, it will be a lot of fun, and you'll get a chance to see a very varied, huge variety of artwork that's all themed on Riverside Park. That said, as you all know, we're 3 weeks away from Election Day, November 4th. So the Thinking Green shows are mostly election related. I just wanted everyone to know that if you are not registered to vote, or you're not registered to vote at the address where you currently live, the deadline is October 21st. There is same-day voting. You have to do that at your town hall or city hall, so it's a little more complicated. But you have another week until you can just mail in or walk in a registration. And while you're registering, you can do it online as well. You can choose your party, Democrat, Republican, or other. And if you choose other, you can put in a minor party, Green,
that would be
Libertarian, yes, Independent. There are quite a few choices. Okay, so my guest tonight is Dr. Bill Collins, and I was noting this is our second Dr. Bill, who is a Green Party candidate this year. A few weeks ago, Bill Clyde, who is running for Congress, was our guest. And tonight's guest, Bill Collins, is running for the state assembly seat in the 38th district, the one that Betsy Ritter recently vacated so she could run for state senate. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
And I guess I wanted to start out by just asking you what your background is. What have you been doing, with the last 30 years of your life before you decided to become a politician?
Okay, well, I think I probably have to go back a little farther than that. I grew up in Kansas, although I'm reluctant to admit that these days because of some of the things coming out of there. But I was a high school dropout. Not too many people know that. Joined the Navy, spent 4 years. Got out and went to college because in Kansas they had a law, if you're a state resident, they have to admit you to college, whether you have a high school diploma or not. And I got a bachelor's, I got a master's at Indiana University in teaching of Russian language. I got a Master of Arts and a PhD in American Literature at Kansas State University. And I came out here and I taught at the University of Rhode Island for about 8 years, and I taught Waterford High School for 2 years. And then I went to the Community College of Rhode Island and taught there for 20 years. And in fact, I still teach part-time classes for them. I've been a resident of Waterford for, I think, 27 years now. Before that, I lived in Westerly, Rhode Island for a few years. And I think that hits the high spots.
Now, so what made you think about running for office this year? I'm guessing you've never done that before.
I have not run for office before. Well, the Green Party just got underway in Waterford this year and this past year. And my son is very much involved in it. He was one of those who actually got it going. And as I listened to him and his friends talk, and I thought about the current state of affairs in the country and in the state, with the two major parties being, as I see it, largely under the control of big money, I thought really somebody needs to run and needs to try to change things. And if nobody else will, then I should give it a try.
And it seems like an opportunity this year too, with Betsy Ritter no one running as an incumbent, and the seat is as wide open as it will ever be.
That seems true. Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking that people might really be looking at who all the choices are.
I hope so, indeed.
Now, the Waterford Green Party has been around for how long?
It's only been, well, I'm not exactly sure how many months, but it's only been a year or maybe a little more than a year. My son and some of his friends actually got it started. So the party in Waterford is made up mostly of young people, college-age students and the like. There are a few older ones like myself, but mostly it's young people. And that I find very encouraging, because I think that means the Green Party is going to be around for a long time, and I think it's going to grow. And as people become more and more alarmed by the state of the environment, global warming, that kind of thing, I think the Green Party is just going to mushroom big time. Plus, I think it's going to grow because, as I said before, the two major parties are largely bogged down with corporate monies and aren't getting anything done, either on the state or national level. So, again, if I get elected, I'd like to try to change some of that, at least in Connecticut.
I know, I've also felt very encouraged by the Waterford Green Party being so young and full of energy. They came to a couple of our New London Green Party meetings, and I realized at that point that our New London Green Party members, whom I think of as young, are in their late 30s. And looking and they're a long ways away from being college students. They're 15
Yes.
or 20 years out. So it's really great to see another generation starting and becoming politically involved and finding a place to get involved that isn't just really depressing.
I agree. I keep harping on this subject, but I think that money is endangering our democracy, and the Green Party doesn't accept corporate donations. Right. And the fact that the young people are idealistic enough to get out there and work for a party that doesn't accept outside money, I think is wonderful. And I hope it does, in fact, work out, and I think it will.
And I think working out at the local level is in many ways the way to start. It's nice to have a presidential candidate for visibility, but really, in your local community, it seems as though you can make better inroads.
Well, as you well know, the Green Party is a grassroots political movement. We feel strongly that democracy depends upon individuals and individual participation, and local communities, communities, organizations, clubs, churches. That's where much of the power now being directed by the federal government and the state really belongs. It belongs in the hands of the people.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem as though that's what's happening in practical effect. I wanted to maybe just start talking about some of the issues that are going on in Connecticut that any state rep is likely to confront over the next couple of years. And I also want to invite viewers to call in at some point if you think of questions or comments that you would like to bring up. Then feel free to call in. I see the number is up on screen. And it's really great that this broadcast goes out to Waterford and also the part of Montville that's your district. So
Yes.
some people who aren't your potential constituents are watching it, but the ones who are can also see it. I guess one of the big things, I'm a retired teacher, but I always taught on the age 1 to 5 level. But education has been a huge issue in the state for the last few years. It's been quite controversial under Governor Malloy, and it's sort of, emotions run really high about the subject. What do you feel about the state of Connecticut's education system?
Well, as far as evaluation compared to the rest of the nation and the rest of the world, Connecticut is above average, and Waterford is well above average in Connecticut itself. But the real issue that I'm concerned with is the imposition of Common Core upon all the states, but particularly in my case, Connecticut, by the federal government. It was a program arrived at with almost no input from teachers, and it really amounts to federal interference with what ought to be directed by parents and communities and teachers themselves, and not by people who see students as corporate products.
Yeah, and that is kind of what's happening. Now, I know you're teaching at a higher level than that, but do you get feedback from classroom teachers about how they feel about what's happening to their job?
I've talked to a lot of teachers. My wife's a teacher, many of our friends are teachers, and I haven't met one yet who approves of Common Core as it stands. They think that it either needs to be drastically revised or done away with. Not only is it being imposed upon us by the federal government and now the state government with Malloy's help, but there are flaws with the way it's being implemented. The curriculum, the material, I think almost everybody knows at this point. It's been called confusing and educationally unsound by parents and teachers all over the country. Most people, I think, by this time have seen the online, the YouTube thing of the electrical engineer who couldn't do the math problem that his child was presented with. One of the textbooks being used to teach English in Washington, D.C. Gives George, I wanted to say George Goebel, but that was a long time ago, George Clooney, about 6 pages, and gives Mark Twain 6 pages. I like George Clooney, but he's not Mark Twain. And the problem with that is that Common Core emphasizes the development of skills rather than the learning of content and matter. Now, that sounds okay. Learning skills is a good thing. But if it's done at the expense of learning basic English literature, basic history, those kinds of things, then it's a terrible mistake, I think, and it's going to result in the exact opposite of what it's supposed to accomplish.
And it seems like it starts.
It was us. Okay.
Okay. Actually, I think we have a phone call. Line 2? Is that what I was told?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for calling Thinking Green. Hello? Thank you for calling Thinking Green.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Ronna, this is Dennis. I have a question for Mr. Collins. You were just talking about Common Core. Now, there's a price tag for cities or a state. I don't know who's going to be paying it for each area to implement Common Core. Is that not right?
I'm sure that's true, yes.
The testing, certainly.
The testing will,
Is it the state that's got to foot the bill, or is it each school district?
Well, I actually don't know about the financing. I assume the state will pay for part of it, but I'm sure also that the school districts will have to chip in.
So you wouldn't have any idea about what kind of money we're talking, would you?
I have no idea about the actual expense at this point. I do know that the people making up the tests are going to make a killing. They're going to make a lot of money off of it.
Well, even when I was on the school board 5 years ago in New London, more money was going than had previously gone to things like tracking student skills, and less money was available for like hiring art teachers. And because everyone was crazy to get the data.
Yeah.
And I mean, it isn't just what you're teaching, but I think part of the problem is that then once you've decided what students have to learn, then you have to figure out how to test whether they're learning it or not. And those tests are,
Hello?
yeah.
Hello?
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 I hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got messed up here, Ronna.
Okay.
I got messed up here, Ronna.
I think,
I just wanted to thank Mr. Collins for his response.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't have more information for you.
So, yeah, well, the Common Core, part of the issue is that, and you mentioned the idea of skills, like we're not educating our students, we're like training them.
We're training them to be training them to be corporate functionaries, to be able to do a job. And that's good. People need to be able to do jobs, no question about that. But they also need to be able to think. They also need to have information and background and understanding of history and literature and culture. That's part of thinking and being human. And without it, we're doing them a terrible disservice.
And I think that the United States, although it hasn't always had an education system nationwide that's ranked high in the world in some ways, it's always been a place where there's been a lot of innovation happening. And, I fear that if Common Core becomes the norm, that's not going to happen anymore.
Well, again, one of the problems with Common Core is that teachers are told what they can teach and how much time they can spend teaching it. They're not allowed to select things for themselves, to pick what's best for individual students, to differentiate between the abilities of different students. And again, that's not good.
No, that's kind of, I heard from somewhere that students who come from really difficult backgrounds, they come to school and they're told, check your baggage at the door. So if they're hungry at home, if they have dysfunction at home, if whatever, you come into the classroom, they're supposed to forget it all.
Yeah. I know a number of teachers who bring food in for students who clearly haven't had breakfast, and they, out of their own pockets, pay for it. But that's a different issue.
It is. But, so the student is kind of getting forgotten in this.
Yes.
Well, we might yet get back to education, but we might not. The economic development, everyone's talking about economic development in all these state races. And Connecticut does have some difficulties. It's losing people, it's losing population statewide, although I think Southeast Connecticut doesn't have that same problem. But what do we do to create a good economy here that will serve as a good economy in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Well, just as we need to decentralize with government and give more power to ordinary people, we need to do the same with the economy. We need to make economies locally centered, and that means lots of small business. It means we need to reduce property taxes and other kinds of taxes as much as we can, because young people are leaving the state and retirees are leaving the state because neither group can afford to live here. It's one of the 2 or 3 most expensive states in the nation to live in. I think maybe Alaska and one other might be more expensive. The minimum wage in the state and in the country, for that matter, except for Seattle, is way too low.
In Connecticut, it's nowhere near living wage.
No, they just recently voted to raise it to $10.10 an hour. I did a little bit of quick math, and that comes on a 5-day work week, still less than $20,000 a year. And even with a 6-day work week, it's only about around 21,000. And that just isn't enough money. What's happening, of course, is that people are working at Walmart and Target and fast food places. They're getting minimum wage, and then they have to go out and get food stamps or something like that in order to feed their kids, and that's an obscenity.
Well, I have to tell you, even my working in early childhood education, I was lucky it was a second income for us, but there were a lot of mostly young women who were working there. And you know what? They were putting in their 40 hours a week, and then they had second jobs.
Yes.
And some were parents of young kids, and they really hardly ever saw their children because they were tending bar or working in retail, from 7 to 11 after working from 8 to 4. So, it's really...
Yeah, that's just criminal. That should not happen.
Now, there's an economic argument we sometimes hear that if we raise the minimum wage, it will hurt business.
Well, we're already subsidizing these businesses that are paying minimum wage because we have to pay for the food stamps and whatnot that people who are on minimum wage have to get to survive. So we're already paying for it in that way. But also, I think if we raise the minimum wage, we give people more money to spend in local businesses, in all businesses for that matter, and I think everybody would benefit from it.
And actually, I think it's the states that have higher wages are the ones that are in better economic shape. It seems counterintuitive, but...
Seattle seems to be doing very well. They passed the $15 Minimum Wage Act, and they seem to be doing pretty well out there so far. So I think the argument that would somehow upset the local economy is false.
No, and really, I think people are becoming so impoverished that they're not spending.
Well, you got to have a place to stay, you got to have food to eat, you got to have gasoline to run your car if you have a car. There's not much left for anything else on $21,000 a year.
Yeah, that isn't much. Now, I know the Green Party is also, not just you, but statewide has been thinking about the idea of a state bank. Now, can you talk a little bit about what a state bank could do for us?
It could do a lot. As things stand right now, the state of Connecticut collects something like $5.26 billion a year in taxes and revenues. That money, nearly all of it, I think, almost all of it, goes to out-of-state banks, to Wall Street and investment banks.
So even if there are local branches, their head offices are not here.
Right. The money goes to Wall Street. And of that $5.26 billion, $1.3 billion, give or take a little, sits in a fund and collects no interest at all. And that seems to me a terrible waste. $1.3 billion collects a lot of interest. It should, anyway. But the money that does collect interest for the state of Connecticut is something like 0.18, that is to say, not even 1/4% of interest. Now,
you're really losing when it comes to inflation.
You're giving money to the bank, is what you're doing. They've got more money than they need now. Well, they didn't a year or two ago, did they? But to have a state bank would mean the state would keep the taxes and use those taxes to make small business loans. If they wanted, they could make student loans, and even if they made them at 1%, they'd be making 5%. 5 times the interest that they're making now by sending the money out of state into Wall Street. And certainly, low-interest loans to businesses would create more business in the state. It would create more jobs, probably as many as 5,000 or 6,000 jobs. It's just a much smarter way to do business, it seems to me. The only state currently that has one is North Dakota, and they've had one for over 100 years. And during the recent recession, they had half the unemployment rate that the rest of the states averaged. They had, I think it was 5.8, something like that, when many states were up around 10% and the like. So they've been very successful and very prosperous because of their state bank. And all 50 states have advocates working toward state banking. And there are a number of people in the Green Party in this state who are advocating it as well. And it strikes me as just being so obviously a good thing that I don't understand why it hasn't been done already.
Well, one of the obstacles is probably the big banks where the money is now.
Well, certainly
We
they
talked
would
a
like it.
little about money influencing policy, and I think this is one example.
Yeah.
Now, and one thing I know about you mentioned the possibility of a state bank making low-interest student loans. So let's go back to education a little bit to talk
Okay.
about higher education. You mentioned that when you were a teenager in Kansas, you could go to college.
That's true.
And you probably didn't finish your 4 years with a debt load that you felt would take 30 years to pay off, right?
No, it was a state university. Well, actually, it was a state college then. It's a university now. But no, the tuition was very low. Of course, it's grown a lot even there, but still relatively inexpensive to go to a university there in Kansas because they're state supported to a large extent. And this brings me to another peeve also, and that is that the cost of tuition has gone up exponentially, much faster than the cost of living or the cost of other things has. Somebody needs to figure out why and investigate that. I think universities, some of them are just making an obscene amount of money, at least so it would appear on the surface.
It does. Even some of the state universities, I've been kind of following UConn, and my kids went there, and for a while I used to give money to the foundation, and lately it just I don't know, I had read that they had spent $250,000 to bring Hillary Clinton to speak. And it's like, that isn't what I want my donation to go for. I'd want it to go for more academic offerings and smaller classes and real professors and not just,
Well, again, this affects the economy too, because you have all these students graduating with huge debt. They can't afford to buy a house until they're 40 or 45 or something like that, because they're still paying off student loans. A lot of other things they probably can't buy as well. And consequently, the housing market suffers. The economy suffers generally. As the housing market goes, so goes most of the rest of the economy. So somebody needs to check into college tuition and find out what can be done to check it or what can be done to ease the burden on students.
And you would think, at least at a state university, that some of the state budget, more of it could go really to ways that benefit students and keep the costs a little more reasonable.
Yes.
Even
Yes.
UConn, I think, I don't know, in the 20 years since my kids were there, I think tuition's quadrupled.
I think I looked into it a year or two ago because I have a son going to college now, and I think it was somewhere around $28,000 a year to go to UConn.
Okay, it's more than quadrupled, it's more like quintupled.
I can't swear by that figure, but I think it's pretty close.
Well, for a public university, that's a bitter pill.
It is, especially if you got 2 or 3 kids who are of college age. It's a lot of money for a family to come up with.
Well, so we talked about education and we talked a little bit about economic development. One topic that I've been seeing coming up in some of the other statewide office debates is the state's deficit. And it is true, we do have a deficit. I think taxation is high for some groups of people, maybe more than others. But what would you say the state should do to address the deficit and maybe slowly eat away at it?
Well, one thing would be the state bank, which I've already mentioned. The state would make a lot of interest and keep it in the state. They would be able to reinvest it in the state, which means, of course, in pension funds as well as other things. That would help. Also, I think that there are some state employees, including teachers, who are not eligible for Social Security right now. The state wants to dig into pension funds. If they made these people, teachers and others, eligible for Social Security, that would help the teachers and the other state employees who aren't eligible, I'm not sure which ones those are, to get by, to be able to look forward to retirement, especially if the state goes ahead and takes money out of the retirement fund, which I hope they don't. Also, they should make available other kinds of retirement funds for people. If the state can't handle the retirement money, then they should make something like TIA-CREF, which college professors already have, available to state employees. Those kinds of things I think would help.
Now,
I'm not sure I really answered your question, but...
and I guess I also wanted to talk a little bit about how both Foley and Malloy in the gubernatorial race are talking that they really don't want to raise taxes, income taxes, including on the very wealthy. What's your take on that?
Well, as everybody knows from the statistics that have been coming out recently, the very wealthy have doubled their income over the last 8 or 10 years, and the rest of us haven't. We've stayed steady or fallen. And so it's only fair, it seems to me, that the very wealthy pay more taxes. If they've doubled their money, then they ought to share the wealth a little bit. And 1% of the people control the overwhelming majority of the money. And that's not healthy for democracy, and it's just outright greed. And it needs to be shared. And paying greater taxes would be a beginning.
I know there have been some proposals that people's annual income that is above $1 million a year could have a 0.5% or a 1% surtax, and
they wouldn't even notice it.
No, and their accountants could write it off on their federal tax return as well. So they'd be paying a little more to the state and a little less to the federal government. And I don't know how they feel, but I feel as though the money I pay to the state is more likely to benefit me in a way that's very tangible, fix the infrastructure, fix the roads and bridges. And
well, if they had a state bank, yes.
Yeah.
But if it's farmed out to Wall Street, it's not working for the state.
Yeah, so it all has to be done together, really.
Yes.
There isn't just one solution that would solve everything.
Right.
Now, the Green Party is kind of known for being the environmental party. That's kind of how it started, and it's taken on a lot more than that. But there are a lot of environmental issues that we are facing right now, and a lot of them have to be dealt with on a state level, and some can be dealt with on a local level. Well, okay, we have a phone call, and so we'll get back to this.
Okay.
Hi, thanks for calling.
Hey, Ronna, it's Dennis again. I like what I'm hearing with Mr. Collins. I have two questions. One, you were just talking about a state bank, which kind of caught my interest, especially when you were talking about the interest being paid back to the state. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And also, I'd like to know how you feel about a flat tax, if that would help alleviate, expecting the rich to pay more. I mean, would a flat tax work for this country?
I know it's... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to call back if you want to. I'm just going to let Bill answer. Okay, Dennis?
Okay, I'll hang up and listen. Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Okay, a flat tax, I think, probably would be a good idea. I'm not an economist, and I don't have the figures. I'm sorry, because I didn't have them on your previous question. But as I understand it, a flat tax would, in fact, bring more money in from the very rich and ease the burden on the poor. I know those like us who are getting by okay. And that strikes me as very fair and very just. It'd be an equal thing. But we got to close loopholes. We can't have people failing to pay any tax at all because they've got good lawyers and good tax lawyers. So it has to be loophole free. And I really, frankly, at the moment, don't trust our politicians to create a law like that.
No, I don't either. So that's why we need some new politicians. Dennis also asked a little bit more about the state bank. And maybe you want to talk a little bit. One thing about at least the state bank in North Dakota, it doesn't have branches that deal directly with the public. It's more like a behind-the-scenes bank, correct?
For the most part, yes. But there are ways, of course, you can apply for small business loans and the like in the state. They have generated quite a few jobs. I don't know the exact numbers, but quite a lot of jobs. And as I said, unemployment was much less than the rest of the country during the recent recession. And of course, every state that puts in a state bank will probably have slightly different ways of operating it. So I don't know if that's an answer.
And I think small businesses do find they have trouble getting capital. You know, some of the bigger banks are reluctant to loan to them, so a state bank would make that available.
Well, that's another problem. Since the bailout, where we put something like $3 trillion into these can't-fail banks, the idea was that they would turn around and make credit available to the rest of us. They didn't do it. They hung on to it. And so credit remains still pretty tight and pretty hard to get. And if you're trying to start a small business, you have a problem.
One thing I had read about the bank in North Dakota during the Great Depression, what they did, in contrast with our more recent mortgage crises, if people couldn't pay their mortgage, the state bank would foreclose on them, but they could stay on their property. If they were farmers, they could keep farming it.
Yes.
And then when the Depression was over, they could just pay off their debts.
Yeah.
They weren't kicked out on the streets.
Exactly.
Their houses weren't sold for bottom dollar, leaving them homeless or without livelihood. And so it was still a capitalistic system, but it wasn't a predatory one.
Yes, that's true. And it very, very sharply contrasting with what happened in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas during the same period, where thousands of people were made homeless.
Yeah, and we have family in Oregon, and some of them did migrate up during the Dust Bowl years to up the coast.
Yes.
Talking about, we started environmental issues because, this is a coastal state. Waterford is a coastal town. What do you see as the environmental issues that on a local level and on a state level we'll have to deal with over the next few years?
Well, environmental issues vary all the way from the small and easily done, I think easily done anyway, such as doing away with plastic bags, single-use plastic bags, to the very complex. And as far as the rising sea level is concerned, I haven't seen any studies on how it's going to affect Connecticut directly, but assuming that the sea level rises fairly dramatically, some of our coastline is going to be in jeopardy. And I hope people in the state in responsible positions are examining that and preparing to take action. I haven't heard of it, however, at this point. Perhaps I've not been looking in the right place. But there are other environmental issues as well that we can do something about real quick. For example, we can give incentives for ride sharing. Now, this has been tried elsewhere, and it works. And I think with the proper incentives, that would be a good thing to do.
Because transportation is really a source of a lot of our carbon-based fuel usage.
It is, yeah. And expanding bus transportation would be good. And of course, even bike lanes. And here in Waterford, we have one on that, was it Montauk, the street that runs by the hospital? But I think that's the only one in town. Are there others?
There's a group in New London called Bike New London, and at one time they were trying to map out how to get all around the city
That's not
on bike.
I'm sorry, that's not Waterford, that's New London. But
that one's New London.
Yeah.
There are some real challenges. And I used to bicycle a lot in Waterford back when I was younger and kind of a fanatic bicyclist. And It could be done. There are I used to bicycle on Great Neck Road, and you could make a great bike lane there.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think there are potentials for, examining more bike transportation. But yeah, I mean, transportation in general, I keep thinking that, if we can make more local jobs, then people just don't have to go as far to get to work.
Yeah,
And
that would be good.
that's often an issue. Now, I don't know the answer to this. Is Waterford plagued by traffic congestion at this point? Has that been an issue?
Not generally. The main clogging of traffic happens on 95, as you know, on Sunday afternoons in the summer and on holidays. In terms of the side streets and the like, I don't think there's a lot of that goes on. Not at least as bad as in some larger cities. So I haven't really thought much about trying to do something to alleviate that situation, because it doesn't appear to me to be a major problem, but I could be wrong, so please call and tell me.
Now, one thing when you were talking about one of your goals in running was to create more transparency in government. What do you feel like is the situation now, and what might be the remedies?
Well, the major thing, and it does affect state politics to some extent, but it's a national problem as well, and that's with these PACs that the Supreme Court ruled were legal a year, or was it 2 ago. And many of them are basically anonymous. People can put enormous amounts of money into them. It can then be spent. They can even claim to be not affiliated with a political party and yet express the opinion of a particular political party. And again, we're back to that old thing of money influencing our politics. But indeed, it's a major danger to our democracy, I think. And to oversimplify greatly, greed is threatening the planet, and it's threatening our democracy. And I don't want to sound like a nut on the subject, but it seems to me that we have to do something about money influencing our politics and our government.
So you've been on the campaign trail now for a few months. How's the experience been?
It's been different. It's the first time I've done this. And I found people generally pretty receptive. I found some people who were just sort of curious, so what's a Green Party? Is that anything like the Tea Party? No, it's not. Others have been pretty interested in what we're doing and what we represent. And I find a lot of people who say, you're not Republican, you're not Democrat? No, good. Because they're fed up with both parties. And I've had some people angrily say, as long as you're not one of those, I'll vote for you. So we'll see in November just how widespread that is. But I think there's a lot of people who are beginning to make room in their minds and hearts for an alternative party.
Now, if people look behind your head, there's a lawn sign. Other than people wanting lawn signs, how can people help you? And if they want to do something for the campaign, how do they get in touch with you?
I have got the some here. I've got a website. It's at billcollins.wgp@gmail.com. You can reach me there. Or you can simply call my home phone. I'll be glad to take your calls and do what I can. And that is 860-447-3156.
And if people want to learn more, there is going to be a public forum at the Waterford Public Library on October 29th.
There is.
7 p.m., and it's the 3 candidates who are all running for the 38th district.
Yes.
Well, we only have about 5 minutes left, and what I wanted to do in that 5 minutes, or part of it, is to show people what the ballot looks like.
Indeed, yes.
So I'm not sure which camera you want to to show it on. We don't have it on a laptop or anything high-tech, so... Okay, so on the ballot, I had a very bad green highlighter. The Green Party line is the 6th line down
Yes.
on the ballot. And in addition to Bill, we have not a full slate of candidates, but quite a few. Mike DeRosa is running for Secretary of State.
Very capable man.
And voting transparency is his passion.
Yes.
So Steve Fournier, who is a Hartford-based former attorney, not practicing, but he is a real attorney, is running for Attorney General. Ralph Maurer is running for Comptroller. And he is also promoting the state. I think the slate really all around the state is promoting the state bank, because it just seems like an idea that we can't lose with. And where are you on the ballot?
I'm the 1, 2, 3, 4th column over in the 6th line, 6th row.
Okay, wait a minute, I'm
4E.
For, is that it? Okay. I know the Waterford Green Party, this hasn't happened statewide, but the Waterford Green Party also made a recommendation that people write in for Governor Jonathan Pelto and Ebony Murphy. There are 3 candidates for governor, Dan Malloy, Tom Foley, and a petitioner, Joe Visconti, who is kind of a Tea Party candidate, small government candidate, who is not tied in with the big money the way the other candidates are. But if people are looking for a more progressive candidate who isn't from the major parties, Jonathan Pelto unfortunately did not get on the ballot, and we could spend a whole other show talking about.
I've heard him speak, and he was pretty impressive.
Yeah, in fact, he's been on the show. He was on back in, I think, May with his PowerPoint presentation about what's wrong with the attitude that we're seeing now in reforming public schools, which isn't really reform, it's just bringing in the privateers. Well, I think we have maybe like 2 more minutes. So maybe just tell people what they can do if they want to support your campaign.
Well, of course, get out and vote for the Green Party, and especially for me. You can talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, tell them about me, because I'm not sure how many people in town know there is a Green Party at this point. I've been putting up signs as many as I could, and I've been going door to door, but I just haven't had time to get everywhere. So if you would talk to your friends and talk to your relatives, that would be a great help.
And now, are you going to try to post people at polling places on Election Day holding signs?
We're going to post people at polling places. I hadn't thought about holding the signs, but maybe we should. Yes.
Yeah, as long as you stay 75 feet
75 feet
away from
All
the
right.
entrance.
Well, I will certainly be at one, and I will have a sign, and since you recommend it. Right.
So people can get in touch with you if they
Yeah.
can put in a few hours to help at a polling station, or if they want a lawn sign, or if they want to do any other kind of outreach.
That's right, yes. Give me a call. I'll get you a lawn sign as long as they last.
And you can go on Wednesday, October 29th, to the Waterford Library and get to meet Bill in person, along with the 2 other candidates for that district, Mark Balistrossi and Kathleen McCarty.
Kathleen McCarty, yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's 3 weeks and then, well, I don't know, if you have a job, it's 3 weeks and then 2 years.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yes.
Next week, we're going to have sort of an alternative congressional debate on the show. As many of you know, there was a congressional debate at the Guard actually happening exactly concurrent with this program. And only the Democrat Joe Courtney and the Republican Lori Hopkins Kavanaugh were invited to participate. There will be all 4 candidates, Courtney, Hopkins Kavanaugh, Bill Clyde, who is the Green Party candidate, and Dan Reel, who's the Libertarian Party candidate, who will all 4 be on the ballot. They're all participating in a debate at Eastern Connecticut State University next Monday. It's on the October 20th at the Tipton Room in the Student Union up at ECSU. But on Tuesday, they'll be on Thinking Green, and they're going to answer some of the questions that the Republican and Democratic Party candidates got to answer tonight. And we're also going to try to talk about some questions that maybe the major party candidates haven't talked about at all.
Or didn't want to.
Right. And one of the reasons we like to have Greens and Libertarians in the election is that some subjects get talked about that might otherwise get glossed over.
Thank you.
So tune in next week. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the road.
All right, thank you very much.
Jacket, and I don't belong in black. I tried running with the devil, but the Lord took me right back. I stopped going to church, and the town came all undone. Oh, the town it came undone. Oh, the town it came undone. So I hopped a train with gypsies, and I learned about their ways. They taught me to play guitar, and I taught them how to pray. I brought them home so they could see where I made my start. Oh, the town that came apart. Oh, that's when the town that came apart. Grass is always greener on the other side of things. For one stricken believer, being told by Dr. Streams. She wants to feel the burning of a loveless lover's touch. She's coming undone. She's coming undone. And I don't fit well and wide. I tried kneeling down and praying, but the devil clung on tight. My mama sewed my lips to keep me spitting at the sun. Oh, but the patchwork came undone. Oh, but the patchwork came undone. So I hid myself away to live a solitary life. But the company I kept came back and pulled me to the night. They brought on all the demons from my self-driven past. Oh, the sun it never lasts. Oh, the sun it never lasts. Grass is always greener on the other